Hello. Today we are going to be talking about the steps between the rise of Hitler with his election as chancellor to the Holocaust. Those things don't just happen. Hitler's elected one day and then the extinction of millions of primarily Jews happen the next. There has to be several steps that occur along the way. So today we're going to talk primarily in the 1930s because the next lesson is going to be about the concentration camps and the gas chambers that a lot of us are already familiar with, and the steps that happen between those two. So today we are going to be discussing what Hitler is going to describe as the Jewish problem. If you remember from our discussion in the rise of dictators, Hitler really uses the Jewish people as a scapegoat for the historic problems of Germany and really humanity as a whole. If you look at the history of the Jewish people, a lot of times they are blamed for a number of problems that occur. They are wandering tribes usually that develop roots, but in history, they are blamed time and again. And Hitler uses them as the reason why Germany, primarily in the late 1920s, early 1930s, during his rise of power, is in such a terrible state economically, politically, socially. Now, we know from our studies of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles that a lot of that is self inflicted among the German people. But when you're a leader, it's easier to scapegoat a group of people that traditionally get blamed rather than accepting that responsibility and trying to build everybody up together. So Hitler really casts a wide net and says the Jewish people are the reason why Germany is like this. So we can do a few things. Well, we can try to dehumanify the Jewish people, make them secondary citizens, practically not even human beings, thereby eliminating their power. Or eventually, as Hitler says, get rid of the Jewish people altogether and life will be better. This is a core Nazi belief. If you were part of the Nazi high command in the 1930s, you believed we need to get the Jewish people out of Germany as quickly as possible, and then eventually that's going to transform. We just need to kill them. And we're going to see how that happens. But Hitler cannot just start murdering all the Jews as soon as he is in power. That is not how power works. It's a gradual transition. First, you have a high number of Jews in Germany, and we're going to look at the exact numbers. These are people that own businesses. They are friends with German people. They married into German families. Hitler just can't say, you're all gone now, and we're going to put you into these concentration camps and kill you, because that would delegitimize his power, and the German people in the early 1930s definitely would rise up against that. It's a gradual transition from normal life to the Holocaust. And really, the people of the world are responsible, as we'll see, because they saw these steps happening, and a lot, not all, and that's always important to remember. There were a number of German detractors and detractors across the world that say we need to stop this, but that allowed Hitler to take these steps. So our story today really involves, once again, the Jewish populations in Europe. And this is from 1933. And this just kind of helps us understand the number of Jews that are in European countries. So we have here Germany. We have over half a million Jews. Poland has one of the largest Jewish populations in the world, 3 million. Czechoslovakia, 350,000. The Soviet Union, almost 3 million. So we can see this is not a small percentage of people, but still a minority in each country. And Hitler is going to say we need to get these millions of Jews out of Europe as quickly as possible in order to restore the normalcy that was life before the Jews came to Europe. And Hitler's going to say, how can we kind of tell who is a Jew and who is not? Because, like we said, the Jewish people, they are a tribe and a religion that have been around for thousands of years, definitely married into non-Jewish families. So, like, how can we tell if your mom was a Jew and your dad was German? What does that make you? And so Hitler's going to fall back on this practice of something called eugenics. And it can kind of use your physical attributes to test who you are in your ethnicity. And this is a practice from the 1880s, really started with the rise of Darwin, but really falls out as a science after World War II. There are a number of factors that say how we look. It is not just one ethnicity over another. But we see here a German scientist is looking at the nose length of what he is going to consider a Jew and use a number of other physical attributes. So Hitler is going to use these to say there is a stereotypical prototype Jewish person. We're going to test people. We're going to see, do you fall into that category? And if the state considers you a Jew, you will have to wear that mark for the rest of your life. And we're going to talk about what that means once again. So when Hitler comes into power in 1933, there really is a plan on how are we going to separate Jewish life from German life, because we need to slowly peel away those layers that make a Jew a German and turn the German people against the Jewish people. And so he really begins with an economic boycott. And we see this throughout history in a number of times where people kind of vote by their wallet. There are certain companies today that people say, like, well, I'm not going to shop at this store because they believe in that. And that economic boycott definitely has an impact. So Hitler's first plan is to try to make life so terrible for Jews that they leave Germany. He does not want a single Jew left in Germany. So what if we tell the German people, do not shop at this Jewish store? Do not shop at this Jewish clothes store, or this Jewish deli, or this Jewish hardware store, so that the business eventually goes bankrupt, and then the Jewish person that ran that business can no longer be a part of our society, and they move to another nation to try to start their life. This is aimed primarily at middle to upper class Jews. Throughout the 1930s, poor and disabled Jews are going to begin to be killed. And this is documented cases very early on in Hitler's chancellorship where he will call them rogue agents of the SS begin rounding up and killing poor and disabled Jews, people that may not have a huge impact on the society of Germany. But you can't go to a very wealthy Jewish person and say, we're going to round you up, because that will have ramifications. So what do? You attack the money source. And so this is a sign outside of a Jewish store. It says, Germans, defend yourselves. Do not buy from Jews. And this economic boycott is really going to begin to have an effect on Jewish life as German people stop using Jewish stores. And now the Jewish community has to look inward and rely on themselves, placing a greater degree of separation between German society and Jewish society. Hitler still needs to continue that separation. So in 1935, the Reichstag passes a law called the Nuremberg Laws. And these are laws that officially strip Jewish people of traditional civil rights that will be held by all German citizens. It strips Jewish people of property. So a number of Jewish people will have to give their house, their business, to a German friend, and who knows what that German friend's going to do with it. And it also forces all Jews to carry identification with them at all time, explaining who they are, the percentage of Jew that they are, and kind of their business. We also are going to be seeing the beginnings of forced sterilization. One of early attempts to control what Hitler would call the Jewish problem is to sterilize all Jewish people in Germany. As they say, if people can't procreate, well, eventually within one generation, there won't be a Jewish problem. So this forced sterilization is going to be backed by a number of scientists and politicians who may not be at the level of Hitler that says, I want to kill all Jews. They just want to deal with the Jewish problem. Well, instead of killing the Jewish people, what if we just make it impossible for them to have kids, thereby solving the problem without technically murdering them? And so we see here several pictures of the identification, property transfer, and the very famous Jewish star that's going to have to be worn by a number of Jews in Germany at this time. Once again, we are trying to separate German society from Jewish society. And once Hitler separates those two societies, well, then he can commence with the official plan to get rid and then execute the Jewish people. So we see here in a German book, the Nuremberg Race Laws of 1935, we have the Nazis banned Jews from serving in the military. Nazis passed laws allowing for forced abortions on women to prevent them from passing on hereditary diseases. And then the Nuremberg race laws are decreed. And we have from the German government and their scientists how to determine if somebody is a Jew, what to do, and how to stop the procreation among those races. And we have a political cartoon, which Hitler is going to use very successfully. It says you have 5 Reichmarks, which is dollars, and it costs $5 to feed, house, and clothe one disabled person, a Jew, for a single day, or you can use that $5 on an entire German family to help them survive. So, what are you going to use that $5 on? The poor and disabled person or the German family? We can see just from this political cartoon, very dark colors over here, light colors over here, face mute, young kids, happy, sad looking person over there. So Hitler's trying to separate those two ideas. This is also going to follow a lot of public ridicule. So Hitler not only officially passes the Nuremberg laws, which separate those two societies, force Jews to wear identification, to give up their property rights and a lot of their business rights, and now society is going to begin publicly ridiculing Jews. So in school, you would have had to have worn that identification, and there would be lesson after lesson on the shame of the Jew, how they ruined Jewish society, turning young people against them, closing up businesses as well, being forced to wear signs. If a German marries into a Jewish family, there's going to be ridicule on that German family as well. This is to stop Germans from marrying into Jewish families, which is going to make it easier to separate that society and then to force the Jews to leave and then eventually kill them. So massive amounts of public ridicule. Just think the steps that we take every day to kind of avoid being embarrassed in the halls, to avoid being ridiculed on social media. Public perception changes very quickly on there. And we see in the 1930s the continuation of just this separation of society. This is a coaster that would have been at a restaurant depicting a stereotypical Jewish person, very outlandish features. A bench just for Jews that's going to be a lot worse than the German bench. Jewish people being forced to clean the streets in a big crowd of Germans, just trying to create a second class of citizenry for the eventual separation of the people. We see throughout the 1930s, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit as well, as Adolf Hitler expands into nearby areas, primarily the Sudetenland, Rhineland, and then Austria, more and more Jewish people are coming under Nazi control. It's not just German Jews anymore. Now we have Austrian Jews. And then eventually we'll have other Jews as Hitler begins his conquest of Germany. So Hitler, whose big plan is to remove the Jews from the population that lives under his rule, as he expands, a kind of secondary aspect of that is more and more Jews are under his control. So we're going to begin to see what Hitler is going to do as he expands, which is his goal, but he also expands the number of Jews that live under him. And once again, 1938 is going to continue this discriminatory actions against the Jews, making life almost unbearable for Jews living under Nazi rule. So Hitler's big plan, as we talked about, is to remove the Jews from German rule. And throughout the 1930s, by stripping away their citizenship, by stripping away their property rights, their kind of lifestyle, their ability to marry into German families, life is incredibly hard for Jews in Germany. And so they make the decision that Hitler wants them to make to leave Germany forever. So we call this a period of Jewish exodus. We have a number of stories from people, even today, my grandparent, my great-grandparent left Nazi Germany in 1935 and went to England, and then from there came to America. We see that a lot of times as life is becoming increasingly difficult for Jews in Germany. And so this is just an example. We have from Germany, 5,000 Jews go to Czechoslovakia, 52,000 to the United Kingdom, 30,000 to France, but still not enough Jews are leaving. And we're going to talk about that on our next slides, why that is the case. And that is a question that a lot of you asked on your notes. Why didn't the Jews just leave Germany during this time? If life was so terrible, if they knew family members and friends that were being killed, kind of leaving their house and never being seen again, Why didn't they leave? Well, in order to migrate, you have to not only leave a country, but you also have to be accepted into another one. And this is going to be the big decision at the end of the 1930s. Who is going to take all these Jews? A high percentage of Jews wanted to leave Nazi occupied land, but no country would take that many refugees. So in 1938, the Evian Conference began, where 32 industrialized nations, mainly European nations and the United States, and other North and South American nations as well, came together to try to solve the problems of Jews fleeing Nazi-controlled territories. What are we going to do with these people that want to leave, whose life is terrible under Nazi-controlled Hitler? What are we going to do? And every nation went around after 9 days and said, this is terrible. We hate what Hitler is doing. We want him to stop, but we are not going to take any more additional Jews than what our original refugee numbers say. Every nation, or most nations, have an immigration quota. We'll take 100,000 citizens from Germany, 75,000 citizens from Israel, for example, or Pakistan or other nations, but no more than that. And so these nations were not willing to budge and accept more Jews than their refugee quotas wanted. The United States is going to decline entry to almost all Jews that were seeking refugee status outside of wealthy scientists, doctors, a lot of other people they will allow in the country. But we have a yearly cap of the number of refugees we'll accept. And when we hit that, Franklin Roosevelt did not want any more. This is going to leave hundreds of thousands, even millions of Jews to stay in Europe without a place to go and to die in Nazi hands. This is a political cartoon for the time. The Evian Conference attendees failed miserably in their attempts to find refugee for Europe's Jews. We have a Jew here, non-Aryan, go, and every place he goes will not let him leave the control of Nazi Germany. This is an example of a ship because, once again, Jews are trying to leave Germany, even if they don't have a safe harbor. A number of people are trying to get on these ships to go somewhere. They know Germany is not safe. They are trying to leave. This is the ship, the St. Louis, which departed Europe and first went to Cuba, where no Jew was able to get off the boat. Then the St. Louis went to Canada and the United States. No Jewish person was allowed to leave. And the United States famously sent the St. Louis back to Europe. And over a quarter of the Jewish population on this ship in the 1930s will eventually be killed in Nazi death camps. So the United States and all these other nations are semi-complicit. And we know life is bad. We kind of see where Hitler is taking the separation of society, but it's not our problem. You have to go back home, which for some was a death sentence as well. So now, throughout the 1930s, 1933 to 1938, Hitler has very successfully separated Jewish society from German society and really created two separate societies where the Germans don't consider themselves Jews and the Jews do consider themselves German, but societally they are separated from being those first-class German citizens. And then history really is going to change, and we usually think of Kristallnacht as the beginning of the quote-unquote Holocaust, where we see a massive ramp up in the execution of the Jewish people and other minorities. So on November 7th, 1938, there was a murder in Paris. Ernst Roth is going to be mortally killed by a son of a deported Polish Jew who wanted to make a political statement. He wanted to kill somebody. He wanted his pain to be felt by the Nazis. This is a political assassination. And in response to this political assassination, we see a widespread destruction of Jewish property. And so we call this Kristallnacht. And in November 1938, 4 days after the murder of a German officer in France, mass retaliation is going to begin throughout Nazi-controlled lands, primarily Germany and Austria at this time, against Jews living in those areas. Hundreds of synagogues are going to be burned. Businesses are destroyed. Houses are raided and burned, and Jews are beaten and in some cases killed just for being Jewish in retaliation for this. Now, Hitler is going to spin this as the German people rising up against the Jewish people and saying, like, enough is enough. We want to defend and protect our German heritage. And he is going to say that all of these attacks happened with nobody talking to each other. But in reality, this is an organized attack, primarily through Joseph Goebbels, who's Hitler's propaganda minister and very close friend, closest confidant he had. This allows Hitler to deny any involvement in Kristallnacht and say officially the Nazi Party and me as chancellor had no idea what was going to happen. This was a mass uprising of German people. But when in reality, he kind of gave the go-ahead order to Goebbels and said, this is totally okay. Keep this up, but I cannot be directly involved in it. And we're going to see here in Greater Germany and Austria just the number of attacks that are happening. Any big yellow dot, it says site of several burnings and demolitions. Red dots are fire attacks on synagogues and prayer houses. And we see throughout all of Nazi-occupied lands mass uprisings. This is not something that just happens in one night where German people in all of these towns say, like, I'm tired of having a synagogue down the street. I'll go burn it. This is an organized military attack that was made to look like the citizenry rising up. And this is going to have a lot of effects on the people. The German people did not have a negative reaction to these acts of violence. And I'll go back to this page really quick. We see Kristallnacht in German means crystal night. We call it the night of broken glass. We can see the destruction of Jewish businesses, of synagogues, of rounding up Jewish people and forcing them to relocate. This was an attack on the Jewish way of life. And the German people that lived in these towns did not have a negative reaction to these acts of violence. Think if there was, an attack on a church or a synagogue in Naperville, there would be an uprising. People would band together and say, like, this violence is terrible in our society. But in 1938, the German people didn't do that. Hitler had effectively turned the German people not necessarily against the Jewish people, but as a bystander of what was happening. This is really going to give the Nazi government now room to ramp up violence. You didn't care when we burned their synagogues. You didn't care when we beat them. You didn't care when we rounded them up. Well, now we can kill them and you're not going to care as well. And with no nation accepting Jews under that Evian conference, living in Nazi-controlled land, Hitler beginning to ramp up his invasion plans of Poland and France and other European nations, the question of what to do with Jews in Germany is really going to pop up. So now we have a few things. Hitler has effectively created two societies, German society and Jewish society. He has now seen that the German people are okay with the Nazi Party doing really whatever they want with the Jewish population, beating them, killing them. And now he knows, as my control over Europe expands, I'm going to have now millions of Jews under my control. So what can I do? Well, we are going to call this the final solution. The first step as Hitler begins to expand is to create several ghettos in cities, primarily in Poland. Now he's going to physically separate. You have to round up the Jews and put them all in one place for him to commence his final solution. Nazi officials are going to set up ghettos in main cities, primarily Poland, to house and eventually deport Jews. These sections of the city are going to be walled off and guarded so no Jew can escape. They are forced to work for free, usually, kept under a military watch. At any time, they can be removed from the ghetto and killed, sent to a concentration camp. There is now complete control of the Jewish population by Hitler and the Nazi Party. So now Hitler has to decide, what are we going to do? In 1942, the Wannsee Conference is commenced to solve the Jewish problem once and for all. We have created two societies. We've turned the German people against the Jew. We have established ghettos. We have established work and labor camps. Now we have to decide, what are we going to do with the ever-increasing Jewish population under German control as Hitler begins to expand his borders farther and farther by invasion. So the Nazi high command decides to meet and answer the Jewish problem. And this group at this conference decides that genocide or mass murder is the answer. After experimentation in the late 1930s, early 1940s, the Nazi Party has established effective ways, primarily the gas chamber, to kill a large number of Jews. We're going to see several clips in the notes from this movie called Conspiracy, which is about this conference of German high command and several leading Nazi officials that are beginning to mass murder Jews, primarily through bullets and killing them. But you can only have so many bullets at once. So the Germans need to find a way, the Nazis need to find a way how to kill a large number of Jews, several million people, the fastest and the cheapest. And that is when they come up with this idea of the gas concentration camp. We're going to transport Jews into places like Auschwitz, unload them from trains, and put them into gas chambers where they will be killed, burned, buried, and forgotten. And the next train load will come in. So we can see the steps that it goes from Hitler taking over control, Hitler turning the German people against the Jewish people, separating the societies, dehumanizing the Jewish population, eventually rounding them up, and then the decision to exterminate them all. The next lesson is going to focus primarily on these concentration camps, what happened, what life was like. We're going to hear from several people that lived through it, primarily Elie Wiesel, Viktor Frankl, and some other survivors, and then stories of people that did not survive the chambers.